Dave, a 26-year-old with short, straight dark hair and glasses perched precariously on his nose, dashed across the impeccably manicured lawns of Crestwood University. He moved with a sense of urgency that stood out starkly against the leisurely saunters of his fellow students. As a scholar hailing from humble beginnings, he often felt like a specter, haunting the lavish corridors of the university. The wealthy elite who populated Crestwood seemed to barely register his existence, their laughter and camaraderie serving as a constant reminder of his outsider status. Lost in his thoughts and the pressing need to reach the library before it shut its doors, Dave turned a corner and collided head-on with someone. His arms full of books, they spilled out onto the polished pathway in a chaotic mess.
"Watch where you're going, Four Eyes."
A cutting, arrogant voice pierced the air. Dave flinched, his gaze immediately dropping to the ground. The speaker was instantly recognizable, Devin, the 26-year-old student council president, whose golden locks seemed to shimmer with an air of superiority. Flanking him were his usual lackeys, Mark and Calvin, a pair as affluent as they were unpleasant.
I'm sorry, Devin.
Dave stammered, his cheeks flushing. He started to bend down to gather his fallen textbooks, but Mark and Calvin stepped forward, their smiles predatory. "Looks like someone needs a lesson in spatial awareness," Mark sneered, delivering a shove that sent Dave stumbling back. "Maybe he needs new glasses, too," Calvin added, pushing him again, harder this time. Dave lost his balance, falling to one knee as his books slid further away. The trio chuckled, their laughter echoing in the otherwise quiet courtyard. "Don't worry, little scholar," Devin drawled, looking down at Dave with disdain. "We'll let your books keep you company down there." With a final, dismissive glare, Devin and his cronies sauntered away, their voices fading into the distance. Dave pushed his glasses up his nose, feeling a familiar sting of humiliation. He began to gather his scattered belongings when a warm voice broke through his mortification.
"Are you all right? I'm Shekinah. And this is my friend, Gab. Don't mind those three. They're just Devin. He's all bark and no bite, really. Though he does have a loud bark."
Thank you. Thanks again. I'm Dave.
"We know," Shekinah replied, her smile widening. "You're the top scholar, right? We've heard amazing things about your research in quantum physics." Dave's eyes widened. "You have." He'd always assumed his academic achievements went unnoticed by the more prominent students. "Absolutely," Gab confirmed. "Shekinah and I are in the engineering department. We actually wanted to talk to you about our community project. If you're interested, we can meet up tomorrow at the Cafe Bistro," Gab added. Dave looked from Shekinah's warm eyes to Gab's expectant face. For the first time since arriving at Crestwood, he felt a flicker of something new. Not just recognition, but genuine interest. Perhaps he wasn't so invisible after all. That night, a melodic whistle preceded Dave's entrance into the small, familiar living room. His grandmother, Margaret, sat on the porch swing, a quiet sentinel against the fading light. She recognized the buoyant lilt in his tune, a sound rarely heard these days. A soft smile touched her lips as he stepped inside. "Grandma, you won't believe the people I met today at Crest College." Dave practically burst with excitement, recounting tales of newfound camaraderie and shared laughter. He spoke of new beginnings, of possibilities stretching out before him like a freshly paved road. But as he spoke, his words gradually tapered off, his gaze snagged by the subtle shift in Margaret's expression. The usual warmth in her eyes had receded, replaced by a deep-seated melancholy that seemed to pool in their depths. "Grandma, are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You look sad." Margaret, ever the stoic, offered a dismissive wave of her hand. "I'm fine, dear. Just fine." Yet, her gaze drifted past him, unfocused and distant. A tremor ran through her, a barely perceptible shiver despite the evening's warmth. Inside, Margaret's mind was a maelstrom of disquiet. Dave's innocent exuberance had unwittingly pricked a wound she had meticulously tried to cauterize. He couldn't know about the past, she thought, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of the swing. "Not yet. I need to protect the boy from the wicked people who are still after him." The word wicked echoed in her mind, a venomous whisper of forgotten fears. She was being haunted, not by a dream, but by a nightmare, vivid and persistent, replaying on the screen of her mind. A memory she desperately wanted to bury, deep beneath layers of time and denial. But how could she? The tendrils of that forgotten terror snaked through her consciousness, tightening their grip with each passing moment. Her turbulent thoughts were abruptly shattered by Dave's voice, closer now. "Grandma, have you seen my necklace? I left it here on my table this morning." He glanced at her, a hint of impatience in his tone. Margaret's hand instinctively went to her pocket, her fingers closing around the cold metal of the pendant. She pulled it out, a simple silver chain with an oval locket, and extended it to him. Here, I told you to protect this, Dave. Her voice was low, laced with an urgency that belied her calm demeanor. She looked deeply into Dave's eyes, a silent plea for understanding passing between them. This is the only thing your mother left you. Dave took the necklace, his brow furrowed in curiosity. He traced the intricately engraved letters on the locket. Grandma, what does stand for? He asked, his gaze fixed on the pendant. Melissa Montgomery, Margaret replied, her voice barely a whisper, the name a ghost on her tongue. She patted his shoulder, a gesture that was both reassuring and final. When you're ready, I'll tell you everything about your mother and about your past. With those cryptic words hanging in the air, Margaret rose and walked towards her bedroom, leaving Dave standing in the quiet living room, a whirlwind of confusion swirling within him. What did she mean by my past? He wondered, clutching the necklace. Who am I? How come Grandma Margaret couldn't give me the truth about my mother? She's hiding something from me. The silence of the house pressed in on him, amplifying the unanswered questions that now plagued his mind. The once vibrant colors of his evening had faded, replaced by the unsettling shadows of an unknown history. The following morning, a palpable tension hung in the air of the opulent living room at the Y.O.R estate. Devin stood before a towering, ornate portrait of his mother, her likeness captured in oils, a serene smile gracing her lips. In her neck was a beautiful necklace. He stared intently, his heart aching with a void no luxury could fill. Mom, where are you? What happened to you? He murmured, his voice thick with a mixture of longing and frustration. The question had become a relentless refrain in his mind, echoing off the gilded walls of his gilded cage. A harsh cough behind him broke his reverie. Jack Balmer, Devin's father, stood framed in the doorway, his face etched with a perpetual sternness that offered no comfort. Stop wasting your time with a person who abandoned you, Jack said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. The words were like a physical blow, striking Devin's already raw nerves. Devin whirled around, his eyes blazing with a familiar fury. Why can't you tell me for once what happened to my mother? He demanded, his voice rising with each word, desperation clawing at his throat. Jack merely glared, a cold, unyielding wall. I have no time for this nonsense. He turned to leave, his dismissal a cruel finality. The pronouncement ignited a fresh surge of anger in Devin, leaving him feeling more desperate than ever. He clenched his fists, the image of his father's retreating back fueling his rage. He needed answers, and he would find them, with or without his father's help. Later that day, the anger still simmering beneath his skin, Devin found himself at Crest College, his mind preoccupied. As he navigated the crowded hallway, he collided with someone. Papers scattered, and a familiar face looked up at him, annoyance etched on his features. It was Dave. Watch where you're going. Dave snapped, bending to gather his fallen books. But Devin wasn't listening. His eyes, sharp and suddenly widened, had landed on something else. Something gleaming faintly against Dave's chest. The silver locket. BMM. A jolt, like an electric shock, shot through Devin. His hand instinctively shot out, grabbing Dave's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Why do you have that necklace? He demanded, his voice low and guttural, laced with an intensity that bordered on accusation. Dave, taken aback by the sudden aggression, yanked his arm free. Who cares? Let me go. He glared at Devin, a mixture of confusion and indignation on his face, before turning abruptly and storming away, leaving Devin standing in the bustling hallway. The image of the necklace burned into his mind. Devin remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing. The necklace. It couldn't be a coincidence. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the keypad. Hey guys, cancel our plans tonight. Something's come up. His voice was clipped, a new, unsettling resolve hardening his tone. The hunt for answers had just taken a very personal turn. The encounter with Dave and the startling sight of the necklace ignited a spark of suspicion in Devin that quickly grew into an inferno. He couldn't shake the image of the locket, the familiar engraving. It was too specific, too personal. His father's evasiveness, his mother's disappearance, and now this. A chilling possibility began to form in his mind, a connection he couldn't yet articulate but felt with an unnerving certainty. The next day, driven by an insatiable need for answers, Devin began to tail Dave. He observed from a distance, a shadowy figure in the background, a silent observer in Dave's seemingly ordinary life. He followed him from classes, watched him at the cafeteria, a knot of anticipation tightening in his stomach. The mundane routine of Dave's day offered no immediate clues, no dramatic revelations. Then, late in the afternoon, his persistence paid off. He watched as Dave left the main college building and took a turn that led him away from the student dorms, towards the affluent residential district on the outskirts of town. Devin's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He kept his distance, his own car blending seamlessly with the sparse traffic. To Devin's utter astonishment, Dave turned into the long, winding driveway of the Y.O.R estate, his estate. Devin's breath hitched in his throat. He parked his car discreetly down the road, his eyes glued to Dave's figure as he walked purposefully towards the rear of the sprawling mansion. Devin watched, a strange, disorienting feeling washing over him, as Dave approached what he knew to be the maid's quarters, a separate wing tucked away from the main house. He saw Dave enter the quarters, and after a tense few minutes, a figure emerged, a woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. It was Margaret, Devin's nanny, a fixture of his childhood, a comforting presence during his mother's prolonged absence. Devin watched, dumbfounded, as Dave and Margaret began to converse, their animated gestures suggesting a familiarity that went beyond a casual acquaintance. He saw Margaret pat Dave's arm, a gesture of affection, and then a faint smile on Dave's face as he re-entered the quarters. Devin's nanny? The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had no clue, not the slightest inkling, that Dave, the boy with the suspicious necklace, was Margaret's grandson. The pieces, though still fragmented, were beginning to shift, forming a new, unsettling mosaic. The world he thought he knew, the truths he had been fed, suddenly seemed like elaborate deceptions. As darkness fell, Devin remained in his car, the engines of his thoughts revving. He drove home, the image of Dave and Margaret etched into his mind. Before he retired that night, he made a silent, solemn promise to himself. He would return. He would investigate. The truth, whatever it was within his reach, and he wouldn't rest until he uncovered every hidden secret. The necklace, his mother, Dave, and Margaret, they were all connected, and Devin was determined to untangle the web of lies that had shrouded his life.
Devin befriended Dave, hoping to get closer to him. He wanted to investigate on how Dave ended up with his mother's necklace. He was desperate to find the truth and what was the connection of Dave to his mother. Devin started hanging out with Dave. He even went with Dave, Shekinah, and Gab to the soup kitchen to gain their trust. The moment presented itself with agonizing slowness. Dave, ever the diligent one, was engrossed in arranging mismatched chairs at a long table, his back to the row of lockers. Gab and Shekinah were in the pantry, their voices muffled by sacks of potatoes. This was it. Devin's hand trembled as he unzipped Dave's worn backpack. Inside, a jumble of textbooks and a half-eaten sandwich. No necklace. His fingers scrabbled through the contents. A desperate archaeology of another person's life. He was so consumed that the chilling silence that fell over the soup kitchen didn't register until a shadow fell across his outstretched hand. He spun around, heart vaulting into his throat. Shekinah stood there, arms crossed, her eyes like chips of obsidian, dissecting him. A slow, creeping flush climbed Devin's neck. His mind raced, scrambling for a believable lie.
Oh, hey, Shekinah. Just, mistook Dave's backpack for mine. Happens, right? All these identical bags.
He forced a laugh that sounded more like a choked cough. Shekinah's gaze remained unwavering.
Are you looking for the necklace, Devin?
What nonsense are you talking about? What necklace?
The air in Devin's lungs solidified. He was frozen, a deer in the headlights of her unnerving knowing. He feigned indignation, a pathetic attempt to deflect. He even puffed out his chest, ready to storm off and salvage what little dignity he had left.
When you're ready to talk, I will tell you everything you wanted to know about the necklace and your mother.
Shekinah's voice was a low, resonant hum that cut through the soup kitchen's sudden quiet. Devin's face, already flushed, drained of all color, turning a ghastly shade of ash. His mother? How was that even possible? His carefully constructed world tilted on its axis.
How in the world? Who are you?
The words were barely a whisper, a desperate plea for answers. Shekinah offered no explanation, no flicker of emotion in her dark eyes. She simply turned and walked away, a silent enigma, leaving Devin adrift in a sea of confusion and shock. The clatter of pots and pans resumed, but to Devin, the world remained eerily silent, the only sound the frantic pounding of his own heart. The following days were a blur of restless nights and agonizing questions for Devin. Shekinah's words had become a relentless echo in his mind, stripping away his focus, making every interaction with Dave feel like a performance. He tried to corner her at the soup kitchen to demand answers, but she was always just out of reach, a phantom in the periphery. He even tried texting her, but his messages went unanswered. One afternoon, he found himself aimlessly walking through the city, the urban sprawl a disorienting maze. His phone buzzed. It was an anonymous number. He almost dismissed it, but a strange intuition urged him to answer. "Meet me at the old library basement archives." Midnight. The voice was distorted, almost robotic, but unmistakably Shekinah's. The line went dead. A thrill of fear, sharp and exhilarating, shot through Devin. This was it. The chance he'd been waiting for, terrifying as it was. The old library was a relic, largely abandoned save for a few dusty researchers. The basement archives were a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge, a perfect place for secrets. Midnight found Devin standing before the imposing Gothic doors of the library, the moon casting long, skeletal shadows. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and damp stone. He pushed open the heavy main door, which creaked like a dying beast, and slipped inside. The grand hall was swallowed by darkness, moonlight filtering through the high, arched windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. He descended the winding staircase to the basement, each step amplifying the silence. The archives were a maze of towering shelves, crammed with forgotten tomes. A single, flickering fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting an eerie glow. He moved through the narrow aisles, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Then he saw her with Dave. A searing surge of anger coursed through Devin. "What kind of game are you playing, Shekinah? Why did you even bring this loser with you?" Devin scowled, his finger jabbing accusingly at Dave. His face was a mask of crimson rage. He started to stalk away, each step heavy with resentment, when Shekinah's voice cut through the air. "Wait, Devin. You don't understand." Devin paused, a deadly look flashing in his eyes before he turned and left furiously, the slam of the door echoing in the sudden silence. Shekinah and Dave exchanged a worried glance before taking off after him. "Devin," Shekinah called out, her voice strained. "If you want to know what really happened to your mother, talk to Grandma Margaret." Devin hesitated, his gaze flicking between Shekinah's earnest plea and Dave's silent, watchful expression. Once Devin had truly vanished from sight, Shekinah turned to Dave, a profound sadness settling over her features. "I know you have a lot of questions about your past and your mother," she began, her voice softening. She paused, gathering her thoughts. "It's time for you to know the truth." The night was calm and peaceful, a deceptive blanket of tranquility that was abruptly torn apart by a violent, persistent banging on the front door. Margaret froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Who could it be?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the frantic thumping in her chest. Her gaze darted to the wall clock. 11 p.m. A gasp escaped her lips as the realization hit her. Dave still wasn't home. The raps grew louder, more insistent, each pound echoing the rising tide of her fear. Trembling, she peered through the peephole, and a cold wave of shock washed over her. It was Devin, his silhouette looming ominously in the dim porch light. Before she could even process the image, the door exploded inward, splintering wood scattering across the polished floor. Devin stood framed in the doorway, his face a mask of contorted fury, crimson with rage, his hands visibly trembling. "What do you know about my mother?" he roared, his voice raw with accusation. "Why does Dave have my mother's necklace?" His gaze, fierce and unyielding, pierced through Margaret, making her feel as though she were under an invisible spotlight. Margaret's knees buckled. She stumbled backward, collapsing onto the plush couch, her fingers digging deep into the armrest, clutching it as if her life depended on it. "Devin," she whispered, her voice a fragile, shaky plea. Devin, a storm of fury, advanced into the living room. "Are you going to tell me, or do I need to call my father to have a little chat with you?" He seethed, his eyes narrowed to slits. A tremor ran through Margaret. "You didn't," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. A cruel smirk twisted Devin's lips as he crossed his arms, an air of smug triumph about him. "Oh, I did. I already told my dad all about Dave and the necklace." Margaret's eyes widened in horror, the blood draining from her face. "You've made a colossal mistake, Devin." Just as the words left her lips, the distant growl of a powerful engine shattered the night's remaining silence. The unmistakable voices of Jack and his men, shouting Devin's name, echoed from outside. Panic flared in Margaret's chest. Before Devin could even react, she lunged forward, her hand clamping over his mouth, silencing his bewildered protests. With surprising strength, she yanked him backward, pulling him deeper into the shadows of the house, away from the shattered doorway. "I will tell you everything," she whispered urgently against his ear, her voice a desperate plea. "Everything you need to know about your mom, the necklace." She paused, her gaze locking with his, "and your twin brother." Devin's eyes blinked in confusion, his muffled protest now a choked sound. "Twin brother," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Margaret nodded, her grip on him tightening. "Not here. First, we need to go somewhere safe." From outside, Jack's booming voice resonated, closer now. "Devin. Devin." Margaret, her heart still pounding, tugged Devin towards the back door. They slipped out, unseen, into the cool night air, making for the hidden, overgrown path that snaked through the back of the property. Meanwhile, Jack and his men burst into the now empty house, their angry shouts echoing through the silent rooms before they abruptly left, convinced Devin had simply vanished. Margaret led Devin through the dense thicket, the moon a sliver of light filtering through the leaves. They reached an old, disused storage shed, its wooden door warped with age. With a quiet grunt, she unlatched it, revealing a small, inconspicuous opening in the ground beneath a pile of dusty crates. It was a hidden door. Margaret pushed a tiny, almost invisible button on the side. With a soft click, a narrow opening appeared, revealing a set of steep, descending stairs shrouded in darkness. They cautiously made their way down, the air growing cooler, heavier, until they reached a small, cramped passage. Margaret stopped in front of an ancient, dusty bookshelf, its shelves laden with forgotten tomes. Her fingers moved swiftly, pressing a hidden button behind a faded picture frame. Devin watched, mesmerized, as the bookshelf slowly, silently slid open, revealing another passage. He had grown up in this mansion, explored every inch, yet he had never suspected the existence of such a place. As the bookshelf fully retracted, they stepped into a medium-sized living room, surprisingly cozy, bathed in the soft glow of concealed lighting. There were 2 bedrooms, a small but functional kitchen, a compact bathroom, and an office tucked away in a quiet nook. A computer sat on a desk, its screen dark. Devin looked at Margaret, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Nanny Margaret," he began, his voice laced with disbelief as he surveyed their surroundings. "What is all of this? Did Dad know about this?" Margaret slowly shook her head, her gaze softening. "I believe it is time for you to know the truth, Devin." They settled onto the comfortable couch, and Margaret began to unravel a tale woven with secrets, betrayal, and a mother's desperate love. She spoke of Melissa Montgomery, Devin's mother, her fear, her forced escape after giving birth to her twins. She told Devin how Melissa had entrusted her with one twin, the one she raised and protected, hiding his true identity to keep him safe, Dave. Margaret's voice caught as she recounted her desperate desire to take Devin too. But Jack, a ruthless man, had hired an assassin, determined to eliminate any potential heirs. Margaret raised Melissa as her own. And Jack, not Devin's real father, was an assassin who had ruthlessly murdered Dennis, Devin's true father, and his grandfather, all to seize the billionaire's inheritance. Jack had kept Devin, not out of love, but in a twisted hope that Melissa would one day surface to reclaim her son. Devin's eyes misted over, then tears began to flow freely, especially when he learned the chilling truth about Jack. "My mom? She's alive?" Devin whispered, the words choked with emotion, disbelief warring with a desperate hope. Margaret nodded, her own eyes glistening. "Yes, Devin. She's in hiding, waiting for the right moment." Devin's tears welled up, spilling down his face. "Dave, he's my brother," he whispered, a bitter smile gracing his lips. "My twin brother." "Yes," Margaret confirmed, her voice gentle. "Your mom left her necklace with Dave. It was a symbol of her love, a promise of her return." The sudden blare of a distant siren ripped through the quiet haven. Margaret's eyes snapped open, a flicker of alarm crossing her face. "I forgot something," she muttered, her gaze darting towards the hidden entrance. "Something crucial." Devin, still reeling from the torrent of revelations, watched her, bewildered. "What is it, Nanny Margaret?" "What's wrong?" "The hard drive," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "It has all the evidence, everything about Jack, his crimes, your mother's proof of life. It's still at the house, hidden in the study. But it's too dangerous," Devin protested, his heart clenching with a new fear. "Jack and his men are still out there. I have to," Margaret insisted, her resolve hardening. "Without it, Melissa's return will be impossible." "Wait for me here, Devin. Don't move." Before Devin could argue further, Margaret was already pushing the button, the bookshelf sliding open once more. She ascended the secret stairs, her movements swift and determined, leaving Devin alone in the dimly lit sanctuary, a whirlwind of emotion swirling within him. Margaret cautiously re-entered the quiet house, the splintered front door a stark reminder of the earlier chaos. The air hung heavy with tense silence, every creak and shadow raising her hackles. She moved swiftly through the living room, heading directly for Jack's study. Her hands trembled slightly as she fumbled for the hidden compartment behind a loose panel in the bookshelf. Just as her fingers brushed against the cool metal of the hard drive, a floorboard creaked behind her. "Well, well, well," a sneering voice drawled from the doorway. Margaret froze. "Jack?" He stood there, flanked by 2 burly men, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Looking for something, Margaret?" Before she could react, one of Jack's men roughly grabbed her, twisting her arm behind her back. The hard drive clattered to the floor, rolling to Jack's feet. He bent down, picked it up, and a triumphant glint entered his eyes. "Naughty, naughty Margaret." Trying to expose me, are we? He chuckled, a chilling sound. You've been loyal to Melissa for too long. Perhaps it's time for you to learn what happens to traitors. Back in the secret room, an unsettling quiet had settled. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity. Devin paced restlessly, his anxiety mounting with each passing second. Margaret should have been back by now. A cold dread seeped into his bones. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. Despite Margaret's warnings, his concern for her safety outweighed his fear. He had to check on her. With a deep breath, he made his decision. He pushed the button, the bookshelf groaning open, and ascended the hidden stairs. He emerged from the old storage shed, his heart pounding in his chest. He crept stealthily towards the house, his eyes scanning the property. The front door was still gaping open. As he approached, he saw a flickering light from inside, and then he heard voices. Jack's voice, and Margaret's, muffled and distressed. He crept closer to a window, peering through a gap in the curtains. His breath hitched. Margaret was on the floor, restrained, and Jack was holding something that looked like a black rectangular box. Fear, raw and primal, seized him. Just then, one of Jack's men turned, his gaze sweeping the exterior. Their eyes met. "Hey," the thug yelled, pointing directly at Devin. "There he is." Devin froze for a split second, then instinct took over. He spun around and ran, bolting across the lawn towards the dense, dark woods that bordered the property. He could hear the shouts behind him, the heavy thud of footsteps rapidly gaining. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he pushed himself harder, weaving through the trees, branches whipping at his face. "Get him!" Jack's voice bellowed, closer now. Devin risked a glance over his shoulder. Two figures, their outlines menacing in the dim light, were closing in. He heard a click, and then the chilling glint of moonlight on metal. A gun? He ran faster, deeper into the forest, tripping over roots, scrambling to regain his footing. He could hear their labored breathing, their curses, just behind him. Suddenly, he burst into a small clearing. It was a dead end. Two more thugs appeared from the other side, cutting off his escape. He was trapped. A burly gunman, his face grim, stepped forward, a pistol clutched in his hand. He raised it, aiming directly at Devin's head. Devin squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. He heard the metallic click of the hammer, a faint whisper of air. Then an impossibly bright, blinding light flared directly in front of him, so intense it burned even through his closed eyelids. A colossal, shining figure, its face glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. It was Gabriel. He has a gentle smile, his eyes were glowing. He whispered to Dave, "Don't worry, Devin. God sent me here to save you." Gabriel's wings was glowing, casting an enormous shadow that enveloped him, shielding him from the impending bullet. A single gunshot echoed through the forest, loud and jarring. Devin flinched, his body tensing, but felt no pain. He slowly, hesitantly, opened his eyes. Gabriel was gone. The towering figure had vanished. The gunman stood frozen, his face a mask of utter shock, his eyes wide and vacant, the pistol still hanging loosely in his hand. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. Seizing the moment, Devin bolted, pushing past the stunned thug, his legs pumping with renewed adrenaline. He ran without looking back, the image of the glowing figure burned into his mind. He ran until his lungs screamed, until the sound of the chase faded into the distance. He burst out of the tree lean and almost collided with two figures. His heart leaped. And beside him, a woman, her face etched with concern, Shekinah. "Devin." "What happened?" Dave exclaimed, his eyes wide as he took in Devin's disheveled appearance. Devin, gasping for breath, tears streaming down his face, clutched Dave's arm. "Dave, they're after me." "Jack's not my father." His voice was raw with emotion, desperate to convey the impossible truth. We're brothers. Twin brothers. And our mother. She's alive." He pointed back towards the darkened forest, his voice shaking. "I saw something. I saw Gabriel. He's an angel. He saved me." The hushed whispers of the trio, "Let's save Grandma Margaret," echoed in the tense air as they crept towards the looming mansion. The oppressive silence was shattered by a sudden jarring gunshot that ripped through the afternoon stillness. Devin's breath hitched. "Nanny Margaret," he hissed, his voice barely a tremor. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through him. They exchanged quick, panicked glances, a silent pact forming between them. As they burst into the mansion's grand foyer, a chilling scene unfolded. Jack stood, a menacing silhouette, his hand gripping Margaret's arm like a vice. Devin's blood ran cold. His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to buy them time. He locked eyes with Dave and Shekinah, a silent signal passing between them. "Dad," Devin cried out, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands. He forced a wide, seemingly innocent smile. "I'm so glad you're here." These three, he gestured dismissively towards Dave, Shekinah, and Margaret, are spouting the most ridiculous nonsense about you. Jack's eyes, as sharp and calculating as a predator's, narrowed. He scrutinized Devin, searching for any hint of deception, any flicker of awareness that Margaret might have betrayed his secret. The agonizing silence stretched, thick with unspoken suspicions. Then a slow, contemptuous smirk spread across Jack's face. He seemed to conclude that Devin remained blissfully ignorant. Like what? Jack's voice was dangerously low, laced with an anger that promised pain. Devin let out a hollow, artificial laugh. "Oh, you know the usual drivel. They're saying I can't trust you, that you're an abusive father." Jack's smirk twisted into a snarl. "Oh, really? So they're trying to destroy my relationship with my son, are they?" Devin subtly nodded at Shekinah, a silent cue. Shekinah, her eyes blazing with an unwavering resolve, stepped forward. "Jack, we're not trying to destroy anything. We're simply showing Devin what kind of a monster you truly are." Jack's gaze snapped back to Devin, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Son, bring them inside the house. Tie them up." Devin's heart pounded against his ribs, but he managed a convincing nod. "Yes, Dad." As Jack, his grip still firm on Margaret, led the way into the mansion's depths, Shekinah seized the opportunity. "Jack, you need to let us go," she pleaded, her voice calm yet firm. Jack merely scoffed, his eyes devoid of emotion. "What? I have nothing to lose. Aren't you afraid of God's judgment?" Shekinah pressed, her voice laced with a quiet intensity. A harsh, mirthless laugh escaped Jack's lips. "God? There is no God. I don't believe in fairy tales. When I was a child, I prayed every day for him to provide for my father. But my father got sick, and his rich boss, the one he dedicated his life to, refused to pay him. My father died penniless, heartbroken." His voice hardened, a raw edge of resentment surfacing. "That's why I vowed I would never be pathetic and poor like him. I vowed to do everything, anything, to be rich." Margaret, her voice surprisingly strong despite her ordeal, interjected, "Is that why you killed Dennis?" "Your best friend." Jack's face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "Shut up, old hag," he bellowed, raising the gun and pointing it directly at Margaret. Margaret, undeterred, continued, her words like daggers. "Dennis trusted you. He hired you as his private bodyguard, paid you handsomely, even gave you a house. And still, you killed him." The air crackled with tension. Devin, his face a mixture of desperation and dawning horror, looked at Jack. "Is that true, Dad?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He took a hesitant step forward, placing himself between Jack and Margaret. "Or should I say, Jack, did you really kill Dennis, my real dad, and steal his wealth?" Devin's eyes, once clouded with fear, now blazed with a furious realization. "You want to shut up Nanny Margaret because you don't want me to find out what kind of a monster you truly are, don't you?" Jack let out a guttural growl, his face twisted into a grotesque mask of fury. "Yes," he roared, his voice thick with unbridled malice. "I killed your father. And you are next." He swung the gun, aiming it squarely at Devin's chest. "That explains it," Devin said, a chilling calmness in his voice as he looked at the barrel of the gun. "That's why you hated me. Because you're not my father." "Yes, that's right." Jack snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "I was only keeping you alive because I knew that one day Melissa would come back for you." "Melissa Montgomery? My mother?" Dave exclaimed, his voice laced with confusion. He looked at Devin, his eyes wide with a sudden, impossible truth. "We are brothers." Jack let out a chilling, devilish laugh that echoed through the mansion. "Oh, what a lovely family reunion. But I'm afraid I have to cut short your happy reunion." He glanced between Devin and Dave, a predatory glint in his eyes. "The police are on their way, Jack." Shekinah's voice cut through the air, sharp and clear. "Just give it up and give yourself up. Start afresh. I'm not going to jail." Jack shrieked, his eyes darting frantically toward the windows. He spun, pointing the gun at Devin once more. Suddenly, with an impossible speed, Shekinah lunged, covering Devin with her body. In that instant, a blinding light erupted. Her face and eyes glowed with an ethereal luminescence, and a pair of magnificent feathery wings, radiant and shimmering, unfurled and hovered protectively over Devin. Jack froze, his mind unable to comprehend the impossible spectacle before him. Dave and Margaret stared, tears streaming down their faces, a mixture of shock and awe. Shekinah, her voice resonating with an otherworldly serenity, looked at them. "I am Shekinah Glory, an angel of God. I stood in the presence of God, and he sent me to tell you that he loves you, and he heard your cries." A blinding light enveloped them all, an intense pure radiance that filled every corner of the room. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, Shekinah vanished, leaving Devin, Dave, and Margaret stunned and breathless. Moments later, the blare of sirens filled the air. The police burst in, swiftly apprehending Jack and his bewildered men. In the aftermath, Margaret, with a gentle smile and a heart full of relief, brought Dave and Devin to their mother, Melissa. The reunion was tearful, filled with explanations and the promise of a new beginning.
Welcome to our channel, Youth on the Rock. Jesus is the rock. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel.